Going to get started. We have a lot of work to do tonight. I know that's what you want to hear. Thank you for coming through the storm. It demonstrates again the commitment that you have to your kids. And we love that because we're pretty committed to your kids as well. This is my confession. I was preparing for this session, and really this has nothing to do with how much I enjoy or look forward to these sessions. I just want to put that out there. But I thought, okay, I got this session. First I thought, oh, I really set that for the second week back. Okay. So last week I took time, I had reading time, I got to look through resources, I mapped it all out, I was really keen, and then I was like, okay, Sunday, I'm gonna lock this thing down. Because that's what I typically do, is do this on the weekends. And so Sunday afternoon I start, and I know that this is what I need to do. And I'm thinking, well, I'll Skype with my kids. And so I did, because they're far away. And then it was such a nice day for a fire. So I lit a fire, and then I went and got more logs. Can you see yourself in this, And then I'm like, okay, I need to do some emails. So I did that, all very important sorts of things that I needed to do. And now it's 4 o'clock on Sunday. And I'm thinking, I got to get to this thing. And so I said, okay, Heather, do this for half an hour. And then you can read. My daughter had sent me an application she wanted me to read and give feedback on. Do this for half an hour, and then you can look at her application. And then I'm by myself in the living room, and I start to laugh, because I'm like, oh, I am living this dream. This whole putting something off, not staying with it, not sort of focusing on what I need to do. And I imagine, depending on how all of our lives unfold, that we come to those places, as do our children. And so tonight, what I'm hoping for is that we have a chance to explore some of these ideas together and think about, some strategies that would support our children, perhaps indirectly even ourselves, as we think about it. That's typically what happens at these sessions. So we're going to remember, some of you are joining. We'll take a little survey in a minute for the first time. Others of you have been with us as we've journeyed and had a look at executive function. So we're going to do a bit of remembering. It's always good to sort of try and set the stage with that. We're also going to look at some strategies. We feel it's really important to go home with some things that you can try and some ideas that you can discuss with your kids and at home. And then I also want to look at those 3 things, but I started to notice in my experience on Sunday, even before my experience, to be honest, on Sunday, that there's a huge link between these executive functions and motivation, I think. And so I wanted to also stop a minute and think about some of the ideas that are out there around motivation for ourselves and primarily for our children. So that's that's our work tonight. Before we go any further, though, I do always love to do a little bit of a check and see who's here. So how many folks are here that have children in junior school? Hands up, please. Okay, awesome, welcome. How many folks have children in middle school? Yeah, great. And what about senior school children? Perfect. And how many of you are guests of SMU tonight? You've come, but you don't have children here. Oh, and I love that number is growing too. Awesome. Great. Well, that's who we are, and that's what we're going to be doing. Let's just take a quick look then at what are we talking about when we say executive function. I'll try to stand a bit out of the way for that and let you read. I think the important piece is really in the second part. It's a set of mental processes that help us get things done or attend to what needs to be attended to or deal with our emotions, a variety of things, and we'll see the list in a minute, that we've been exploring. All of the work that we've done on this series has stemmed from, not the sole resource, but has stemmed from this series called Smart But Scattered. It's an excellent resource, and if anything that you hear interests you, I would highly recommend those books. They're listed also on the resource page for you. Really great to have. From the Smart But Scattered, they identify those thinking executive functions and those behavioral. So what happens in our head and what happens by what we do. And so last time, we looked at and mastered emotional control. Isn't that awesome? Just in a night, we got emotional control all down. And you all went home, and now all your homes have great, amazing emotional control going on too. It's so good. Does anyone ever master emotional control? This is really my question. Anyway, we did have a look at that. We did come up with some ideas and thinking about different age groups. The next three were linked together, but also very closely tied together when you voted in the fall. Some of you that were here voted about, out of all these, what do you really want to pay attention to? And these next three were together. What I've noticed by prepping and thinking about this is we could actually spend a night on each of these. And so you may feel tonight like this is a little bit of a light bump along the top, and that's okay, because there are resources in other places that you can go to explore this, and I'm happy to reference you to even more than what's on the list if you want. Okay, so this is, we aren't going to be going super deep, but we are going to certainly look at that. All right. So there is a theory out there that experience precedes cognition. What does that mean? It means sometimes when we do things, it actually shapes our thinking and our learning about a concept. We actually believe that a lot here. We create a ton of experiences for our students because from those experiences comes the reflection and the learning. Well, tonight, the good news is we're going to have like an experience all together, and then we're going to do some reflecting, and it's going to tie in, I hope, to what we're trying to learn. So you might have noticed as you came in, I heard someone say, well, those certainly aren't Christmas decorations, the juggling balls that are on your table. So they're going to come in handy in a minute because I'm going to, yeah, you're starting to get what's happening, aren't you? Some people are going, oh man, I'm too far from the door to actually get out. So, yeah, where is that guy now? Okay, so we'll slow that guy down for a second. What I'd like you to do, and we might have to spread out a little to do this, and I want you to really, actually, I'm going to give you a bit of an assignment as we do this. I want you to notice what you're thinking and feeling as I'm asking you to do these tasks. Because we're going to come back to it, I promise you. So what needs to happen is everyone needs 3 balls. And then I'm going to show you a very quick, it's about a 2-minute video. And you're going to spread out. You're going to first watch the video. We don't have to do anything with the balls first. It's just a watch and learn. 2 minutes, you'll get it. And then the next time, he'll again, I'll run the video again, because sometimes we need a second go at these things, and you'll get a chance to try. So you're going to kind of like spread out, because you don't want to try to hit your neighbor in the head with a juggling ball. How many of you actually can juggle? Is there anybody here who actually can? Awesome. Okay, a few. So we know who the coaches in the room might be. Should we need a coach? Now, before I show the video, I do want you to have these juggling balls in your hand. Is anybody missing or need some? There's extra here. My staff have been taking these out of my office and using them, and last night I had to send the email that said, does anyone have my juggling balls? And I sat trying to think of how to word that and how to, And then I said, P.S., I know you're dying to make a sarcastic email back, but it's okay. Don't stress yourself about that. Okay. Everybody okay, so this guy is great. He's a great little teacher. You'll all know how to do this in about 2 minutes. I'm just going to turn the volume up a bit.
Sisters and girls, here's how you can work your way up from juggling 1 ball to 3. You will need 3 balls to juggle, dexterity, and patience. Step 1. Stand in a comfortable stance with your feet shoulder-width apart and your elbows bent at about a 90-degree angle. Step 2. Start by practicing throwing 1 ball back and forth between your hands in a nice gentle arc. You want to keep your elbows in and your throws consistent with the ball arcing at about eye level. Using beanbags when you first begin can be helpful, since they won't roll away when you drop them. Step 3. You'll probably find that your throws go awry a little at the beginning, so keep practicing until you can throw the ball back and forth with your eyes closed. Step 4. Add another ball. With 1 in each hand, throw a ball on support and, before it comes down, throw the other ball underneath it, so it lands in your other hand. Practice catching both balls. As you practice, alternate starting with either hand. Step 5. Put 2 balls in your dominant hand and 1 in the opposite hand. Toss the balls just as before, but add a third throw right before the second ball comes down. Keep practicing until you can make 3 throws and 3 catches. Step 6. Once you're confident catching all 3 balls, add a 4th throw and catch, and a 5th one, and so on.
Oh, yeah. We'll get to that next time.
Don't look now, but you're juggling.
See? It's easy. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to find, because you're meant to be standing. I think it'll work better if you stand. So find space, and then I'll start it again. If you're the type of learner that likes to go step by step, you can watch. If you just want to go practice, that's fine too. Okay. Away from the equipment. All right, here we go.
How to juggle 3 balls. Juggling the noble art of gestures and flows. Here's how you can work your way up from juggling 1 ball to 3. You will need 3 balls to juggle. Dexterity and patience. Step 1. Stand in a comfortable stance with your feet shoulder width apart and your elbows bent at about a 90-degree angle. Step 2. Start by practicing throwing 1 ball back and forth between your hands in a nice gentle arc. You want to keep your elbows in and your throws consistent with the ball arcing at about eye level. Using beanbags when you first begin can be helpful, since they won't roll away when you drop them. Step 3. You'll probably find that your throws go awry a little at the beginning, so keep practicing until you can throw the ball back and forth with your eyes. Toss the balls just as before, but add a third throw right before the second ball comes down. Keep practicing until you can make 3 throws and 3 catches. Step 6. Once you're confident catching all 3 balls, did you know juggling while juggling is becoming a popular sport? In 2007, a juggler finished the Toronto Marathon in 2 hours and 15 minutes
Joggling.
while juggling 3 balls.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Okay, I'll give you another couple minutes, and then we'll see if we have any that want to demonstrate. Okay, I'm going to ask you to come back together. Okay, first I need to say, you guys are amazing sports. I was trying to imagine what was going on in your mind when you thought you were coming. So you can see why we're not in the lecture theater. I was imagining people like tumbling down trying to juggle, so that's why we're in here. But also, I think it's kind of a nice venue. So I want you to think about, these are the areas that we're thinking about. We've just had this juggling experience. So what was it like to start that task? What were some of your thoughts as we headed into, this is the task we're going to do, honestly? It's impossible. What else were people thinking? I want to give up. I don't think I can do this.
I'm going to make a total ass of myself.
Yes. I'm going to make a fool of myself. Okay. Pretty hard to get going when you feel that way, right? To initiate a task when you feel that way. So let's think about, we'll talk more in depth, but let's think about some of our kids. And, math is not my strong point. I'm imagining that some of the things that go through their head aren't all that different than what we've just articulated here, right? So you think about that getting started. Tricky. What about sustaining attention? What was it like to try to watch a video, balls are going everywhere, you're trying to focus on your little thing. How did that work for you? Distracting? Yep. What else? Did anyone find a way to sort of sustain attention on this task? Were there some strategies that were working for you as you were trying to do this?
I had to eliminate the video and just focus what I
Block out the video, so I'm too much stimuli, I'm going to just stay right here. Cool. What else? Anything others were doing?
just focus.
Yeah, just staying focused on what you were doing, regardless. Okay, good. And some of you almost immediately sat down, just saying.
Easy to quit.
Others of you went to the tea or the wine, I'm not sure which is okay too. For those of you that sort of tried to do it, What was helping you stay with this task?
It was fun.
It was fun? Okay. Challenge?
I think there's a risk, like just go for it. And
Yeah.
just do it.
Take a little risk? Yeah.
I want to learn it.
I want to learn. I want to learn how to do this. Awesome.
I saw someone do it.
Okay. So that was a bit inspirational then maybe, or something like that? Okay.
The second play of the video was good because it helps.
Yeah, and actually, if it were me, I'd be like, play one thing, do that for a while, stop it. You know, that would just be how I would do it. But yeah, seeing it again to reinforce it. Anything else that helped you kind of stay with it? Those are great ideas.
We had to keep going until you told us to stop.
You did.
Rather than giving up with frustration like I've done other times.
Oh, okay. So you were waiting. You actually could have gone and gotten wine or tea. Oh, yeah, it was an option. Yes. All right, but staying with it. Yep.
And I think that, I wasn't really that conscious about looking around, but I think I noticed that other people weren't getting it, and if everybody was, juggling,
And you were
probably would have like gone under the table.
sure. Right. So there is a bit of what's going on around me in relation to how well I perform. Right? So again, if you hear what you've all just identified, you can imagine that it's not all that different from when we're talking to our kids and we want them to stay with something and push through it. We want them to have those feelings of, I want to learn this, I want to take a risk, I want to, I want to show up in a way that I don't feel stupid, right? So those are the areas that we're going to focus a little bit on tonight. And I think these are sort of questions that might even be worth talking about with our kids. How do you get started on something? What is it that helps you to get started? Why do we focus on some things and not on others? What helps us to stick to things? Those are just great conversations to have with our kids. So we'll dig in a little bit tonight. I said we're going to look at these three areas, and we're going to actually put our kid in there instead of a juggling ball. And we're also going to, in the end up at motivation and thinking about Daniel Pink and some of his interesting ideas there. One of the things that I really do want to stress, and we sort of talk about this a little bit each time, is that what we're talking about at these sessions is our kids who are learning. We talked about the continuum of executive functioning. Some things we're really good at, some things we're not as good at. You did a survey the first night if you were with me as an adult to see where some of your strengths were and some of your areas maybe of challenge. But what we're not going into great detail about in this context is, for example, when I think about sustained attention, this is talking about how do I pay attention when I'm, bored or distracted or just not that interested. But it is not as far along the continuum as someone perhaps who might be diagnosed with ADHD. That's a whole other conversation, and it isn't what we're going to focus on tonight. It is a conversation I'd be happy to support you with, and our LR team would as well. But I just want to be clear that we're talking about helping our kids develop these executive functions as they grow. And if there are areas of particular deficit, then we may need a deeper conversation than what you might get from something like this. All right? So, task initiation. I don't know if any of you ever struggle with this, but back to me on Sunday afternoon, I really need to get this thing going. So it's the ability to begin those projects without procrastination, at least within a timely manner. We all start things in different ways. And it's talking about things not that we love to do. I can't wait to get out there and shoot some basketball hoops, says, my son. That's not what task initiation is about. This is about, you've been asked to do assignment for school, or you've been asked to do the chores at home, or, things that we don't just love to do, but we know we need to do them. That's what this is kind of referring to. So just going to touch very, very briefly on task initiation tonight and talk about a few strategies, again, coming from this Dawson and Guari book. The idea is that we're trying to help our kids over time develop these skills. And we do, all of us, I'm sure, start this when they're really little. But that idea of if it's about getting started, that's the thing you're noticing that's kind of getting in the way, then really praising when you notice that happening. That was great. I noticed you started that. And the conversation about if the child is old enough, what helped you get started. If your child has a task, and I know even my husband and I, we have 3 grown kids, our last and second year university, and even last weekend on the phone, we're like, okay, what are all the things you have going on? What's your plan for that? Like it's helping children at whatever stage they are to say, what do you need to do and how are we going to plan for that? How can we help you plan for that? While still trying to leave them where possible in that driver's seat. Sometimes it might be helpful, to set up a system with your child to kind of cue them. So you could say to them, I know you've got to do this assignment. How would it be helpful for me to, would you like some help? You're going to go off and, I don't know, play a game or read a book or whatever you're going to do that you enjoy for some downtime, say after school. But would you like to have a signal that I could give you that it's time to start this assignment? Would that be helpful? That's just sort of another way to, or, you're going to go off and do that. Do you want me to call you in half an hour for a break and then we'll get back at it? Discussing it with them. Teens, you want to use some goals. Our teens have set goals, right? They're moving through life. They're wanting to drive. They're wanting to go out more. They're wanting to be more independent. They're thinking about their future. So where possible that you can link some of your support in task initiation to the goal, that your teen has set. So for example, if your teen is wanting to drive, needing some time to practice driving, and there's some things they need to get done, then I think we all kind of do this logically, right? If you do these things, then we'll go off for a drive and see how that goes with that. The other thing is about breaking tasks down. You can't do it all at once. And it's overwhelming sometimes for our kids, all the things they have to do. And I find myself sometimes, even with my own children who are sort of semi-adult teen children, saying, what are you going to start with? Or how do you want to start this? Like, it seems big, but where's the starting point? And when you nail that down, even for myself, that's, as an adult, that's helpful. Where do we want to start with this? Okay, so that's a little bit about how to get started. But once we're started, how do we continue to pay attention, right? How do we continue to focus? And we've talked a little bit about the idea of just in spite of the natural distractions and boredom and things that interfere on something that we want to pay attention to. It's really interesting, as I've done these workshops and looked at the brain over the years, it strikes me that, as parents and as teachers, we have so much knowledge and wisdom to impart if only they would pay attention. Like, that's the thing, right? We just want them to pay attention. We're waiting for them to pay attention. And what I've often said is that our kids, our students, our brain is always paying attention to something. So what is it that captures our attention? What is it that sort of attracts us? And within our brain, at the very back, there's this little piece called a reticular activating system, or the RAS. And that filters all of the sensory information that's coming in from the world. And as it does that, it helps our brain know what to pay attention to. As we develop, we learn to tune a lot of things out, right? It's really great that we don't feel, most of us, that, the clothing on us or like all these different senses as acutely because we learn to tune them out. So there are things, though, that catch our attention, and some of them are conscious and some of them are unconscious, all sort of filtered through this RAS. The subconscious things are physical things. I was in a meeting today, it was just before lunch, and one of the teachers said, I can't even think, I'm so hungry. And I thought, yep, that's what this is, right? Paying attention, focusing, sustaining attention. When there is a physical thing going on, that becomes our focus. You notice it in your mind. You get a brand new shirt, you're going off to work, you feel really great, and partway there you're like, oh man, that tag is really annoying. And you spend the whole day doing your job thinking about the tag, doing your job, right? Because your brain is pulled by physical things for attention and focus. Novelty is another way that the attention comes to us. And if something's new and exciting, we do pay attention for a time, right? Novelty wears off, but we do pay attention. Intensity and movement are other sort of subconscious things that catch our attention. And so television knows this, because you watch a TV show, and then what happens at the commercial? The volume goes up, right? Because they're increasing the volume because they know that you need to pay attention, and you're not going to, because really you're not there for the commercials. Most of us aren't there. My husband would say I'm often there for the commercials, but whatever. There are also conscious things that can catch our attention, and these really are the things we, as teachers and as parents, these are the things that we have control over. the conscious parts of attention and focus. One of the big things that helps us stay focused and paying attention is choice. So when we're thinking about helping our students, sustain attention on tasks at school or sustain attention on chores at home, how can we build some choice? Can we build some choice into that? Is there a choice about when it happens or how it happens or with whom it happens? Even any small choice that you can put in creates a level of autonomy and will help with focus. The other piece is meaning and emotion. If our meaning and emotion is engaged, it just takes the learning and the imprint on the brain so much deeper cognitively, right? So when you tell your child to do something and they say, well, why do I have to do that? I don't know if your kids ever said that, but sometimes ours did. That's actually a reasonable question in the sense that if they can see some purpose in it, there's some meaning, then there's more likelihood that they will engage. Now, why do I have to, we were talking at dinner with some friends, why do I have to pick my clothes up off the floor? Because you might trip. You could give a whole bunch of reasons, or you could just say, you know what, at the end of the day, your clothes on the floor make me really grumpy. And when I'm grumpy, it's not a happy place to be around. That's even a valid reason, right? So we want our kids to be understanding why they're doing things that will help them sustain attention. How long is sustained attention? Again, these are a few guidelines from and the teens are coming in a minute around this piece, so don't worry about that. But these are just a few guidelines they're guidelines. So if you have a child in this age bracket and you're like, this is not a test, it's just a guideline. But what is interesting is a number of, the American Teachers Association, certainly an association I was affiliated with before, talked about, again, as a guideline, roughly, about 10 minutes per age per grade, 10 minutes per grade of homework. And then it's always good to do reading, And there's going to be somebody that wants to spend 45 minutes on a picture because they love to draw and that's their thing. But to have, small children doing a lot of homework, we need to have conversations about that. So these are some guidelines about, and I think we try to have conversations a lot about that at school. And if you're noticing that, that's something to chat about as well. So just a few little ideas, again, about strengthening that sustained attention. Not, again, rocket science. I think probably most of you do many of these things. Children will stay more focused if we are nearby. So if there's something that they're working on that you want them to sustain their attention on, especially when they're younger, but even as they're moving into their middle years, if they will allow you, that starts to happen in middle years. If you have something to work on, you can set up there in the kitchen or wherever, close by. So you're available for consultation, you're available, and there's a bit of an understanding. We're both doing our work. Just setting a child up and leaving sometimes makes it tricky if they struggle with sustaining attention. So trying to be available while they're working. When our kids were little, I had them sitting at the island doing their homework while I was making dinner or whatever, and we're just talking. And I think that happens in a lot of homes, trying to sort of keep kids present and you present with them. Increasing attention is a gradual process. If you're wondering about the attention or your child's ability to sustain attention, maybe just time them a couple times. Watch them do a task and see how long they can focus before they need to get up and move around or do things. And you may get a read on them in terms of, they can focus for 7 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is. And then maybe invite them into a challenge and say, if it's 7, well, I'm going to set this timer. See if you can work until the timer goes off and set it for 10. And incrementally build the ability. I mean, again, I don't think I think as a brain you need to get up and move every 15 or 20 minutes, but to come back to it then. But that idea of how long can they sustain attention, it's growing over time. There are lots of devices you can check online that show time being passed and helps children, especially little children, have a sense of the passage of time. We want to try to make tasks as interesting as we can, and that can be just because it connects to something that they like, or that we make it a game or a challenge. Gwari talks a bit about incentive systems, things that kind of reward. And I think, you need to think about what your goals are with that. I'm personally not one that thinks you reward a child for everything they do, because I don't think that that's life. But it's, it's that idea of, is there something that needs to get built in here to sustain a longer, bigger goal? And again, the praise for staying on task is what we want to do as we're trying to sustain attention. Now, we've paid attention to the younger students. Let's think about our teenagers. And so just a few questions here about how our teen attends. And again, it's just kind of gives you an idea. It's not a test for sure, just a guideline. So we have talked a number of times about how we are the prefrontal cortex. I don't know if you read the Maclean's. Anybody see the Teenage Brain article in the most recent Maclean's? Certainly they talk there about the prefrontal cortex is not mature until the early 20s. We are the out-of-body prefrontal cortex for our teenagers. And we're modeling and helping them to develop theirs. So we can and do need to at times provide supervision. It gets to be more of a partnership, checking in, what's helpful, that sort of thing. Richard Gwari talks about his son going up to his room to do homework and asking his dad to phone him actually on his cell phone in his room every half hour to check in on how he's doing. That's just a system that they set up. Whether you like that system or not, they had a bit of an agreement about how that would work. And so there are different ways that we can organize with our teenagers. How long can you work without a break? What do you need, at that break to feel refreshed? That sort of thing. There are also a lot of devices. That Watchminder website, if this is something that interests you, there's all sorts of gadgets you can buy that buzz and ding and, can bring back attention and focus for kids. So just put it there out of interest. Trying to connect to the interests of kids, if they're trying to build strengths, are there chores, that could really build those strengths that would be helpful to you? If they're interested in food, is there some cooking and helping out that way that might take a load off in terms of chores, but would also tie to what they're interested in? And sometimes there's none of that, and they just need to do the thing. And that's the point at which you say you just need to do the thing. And let's figure out a time for that to happen in. The incentive systems, again, he's talking about first, then, which is what we talked about with the driving. First we do this, and then you can go for a drive. First we get this out of the way, and then we do that. And sometimes teens get tangible rewards for doing some things, and you have to organize that in your own family. That idea of noticing, though, the behaviors you want and praising those is really important. The piece with teens that I found most interesting as I was reading about this is this idea of digital distraction, especially behind the wheels of a car, but really anytime. And the idea of how quickly an accident can happen when you're texting. I've actually had that experience firsthand. That would be my second confession if I chose to give it to you tonight, but I won't. But that idea of how quickly something happens, years and years ago, for me this happened. And it's really important that we help our kids understand this. I was looking at some stats, they're American stats, but they talked about how teenagers make up 14% of the population in the US and 30% of the accidents. And the accidents are happening a lot in the sort of 15 to 19 or 20-year-old range. And it has to do with texting. So there are some scenarios where, I didn't know this, but there are programs that can be installed so that your phone turns off while you're driving. It's inaccessible. And it'll turn on if you stop the car because you have to call an emergency. But so there are apps and programs out there that will help our kids to stay focused. Regardless of that, we need to be having these conversations with them because they don't, I know from our kids, they're driving and they haven't had an accident, but I don't think they quite they're good drivers, but it's so quick. This stuff happens so quickly. And as we get to be experienced drivers, we know that we have our prefrontal cortexes. They still don't. And so we have to really reinforce that with them. Okay. So we've talked about a lot of things around task initiation, but particularly around sustaining attention. Just at your tables, maybe with an elbow partner, talk for a minute about what do you do to get your kids started or to keep them focused. What are some of the strategies that you use? And then we'll come back together in a couple of minutes. Okay? Some great strategies, I'm sure, at the table. We should maybe write a book. Okay, so we're going to move on here to goal-directed persistence. I'm just going to keep pushing us towards this. So the definition of this executive function, according to Guare, is the ability to set a goal and work towards it without being sidetracked by competing interests. So when someone decides to run a marathon next year and they start to train, that is goal-directed perseverance. When a couple cuts back on their recreational spending to save for a down payment, that is goal-directed perseverance. If someone wants to work up in their workplace to a new position and they start to take courses and kind of eye that, again, the same thing. It's interesting that this is one of the last executive functions to fully develop in our children. And it's also one of the ones that we start working on really early. Right? And so it's that kind of irony that lives with, this is a complex task. But when we talk to children at a young age about saving their allowance so they can buy that special whatever, that is goal-directed perseverance, right? That's getting them to buy into something over time. And when we're doing this, we help our kids to see that a new skill takes practice, it takes time, it takes something that we need to invest to get ahead. And when we praise our kids for working hard, that's the same thing, right? Thanks, that was great that you stayed at that you really worked hard at that. And we talked a bit about that with Carol Dweck's stuff on fixed and growth mindset. Children learn these skills through a sport, through musical instruments, right? Learning to play a musical instrument. Both the middle and the senior school are going to have a culminating performance in the next 6 weeks, and they've been working on this since like September. The junior school also has something coming up in February, which they've been working on over time, and the children learn that if we continue to work together, at the end, we get to this really cool thing. That's all of those sort of reflect these skills. So some of the strategies that sort of go along with that is starting with those small goals and helping them to see when they're little, you know, that doing some things over time actually is significant. It does make a difference, and they can sort of start to notice that. Build up time to meet goals. What they mean by that is that, you know, a little person can't wait for 4 weeks for something, right? They don't have that capacity. And so you have to have little or shorter time to build that up, and then as they get older, we get to stretch it out a little more. Reminding your child, this is what we're going for, right? You're on the team, you're gonna go every day to the practice. That's what we do, that's what being a part of a team is. You're gonna play a few games, we're gonna see how it goes. Or yes, you do need to go to play practice. You committed in October and now it's January and the rubber's meeting the road and you need to go. That was what the goal is the play. That's what you committed to, right? Again, different technologies available to sort of help with this, counting down calendars, visual ways to help kids see that over time they're going to get what they're striving for. Make sure that whatever it is at the end, they're bought into it. Nothing worse than pursuing a goal when you aren't really fully bought into it. So really helping kids know that this is something that you really want. You know, our teens are tricky, right? Because they're simultaneously instantaneous and long-term in their existence. So we do want to chunk those goals so that they're manageable and so that they're visible. The other thing is, some of the longer-term goals that some of our kids are looking at is what school are they going to go to after being here? Or what are they thinking about for their futures? So chunking those and making those manageable are really important. And if you have conditions like, you know, it's not going to be possible for us to send you to a school in the US, it's too pricey, then as they're making their goals, you need to have those conversations, right? Rather than they setting all these lofty goals and then not meeting the criteria. If they're thinking about driving and they have a certain vision of what that's going to look like and you have some parameters around that, good to have those conversations so that their goal setting isn't going to be undermined at the last minute because suddenly there's a bunch of information they need to know. Makes it tricky. So again, nothing sort of rocket science there, I don't think, just some reminders of the things that, that we do and need to do to help our kids develop this executive function. So I told you at the beginning that I thought motivation kind of weaved its way through there, and I found it interesting, this quote by this young Ben, age 17. I'll read it because it might be hard for some of you. It's hard to go after what you want when you don't know where to start, or even when you don't know what you want, and kids struggle with these things. Motivation is the difference maker when it comes to goal-directed persistence in teenagers most of the time, in my opinion. And I thought, yeah, I had been feeling that as I was doing this reading and this work, and then it was articulated, and I thought, you know, that's right. What is it about motivation that could kind of help us understand and support these executive functions? So how many of you are familiar with Daniel Pink and the book Drive? Anybody? A few? Okay, great. So Daniel Pink is the author of 5 best-selling books. Really interesting man to read. He has a law degree from Yale. He was the chief speechwriter for Al Gore, and then he left all of that and went to write books, and they've all been bestsellers. So he's had a pretty rough life. No, he's a very accomplished man. In his book Drive, he looks a lot at motivation. What is it that motivates us? And he's writing mainly to the business audience. And he's looking at sort of 4 decades of science research on motivation, and then looking at how that kind of mismatches with what business does, right? He's kind of saying, okay, this is what science says about motivation, this is what business is doing, and they're kind of going like this. And he has a very interesting online talk about that. If you find this fascinating, just Google it. But he talked about, because of our evolving world, you know, carrots and sticks may have worked at some point when the bulk of people were doing that kind of processing work, that just you did the same thing over and over again. You weren't required to be creative and out of the box and problem solving and all the things that we have morphed to in our society today, and the things that our kids are going to need to know how to do. And so he starts to look at, well, what are the elements of true motivation in this world now, in the kind of world that our kids are going to need to engage in? And in that, he talks about autonomy and mastery and purpose. And there's some really neat techniques in the book that go deeper in each of those if you're interested. What connected me to this is that he spoke with a reporter in a magazine that I get called Educational Leadership about how to apply this work of Drive to teachers and students and schools and I think parenting as well. And so I want to bring you just 3 ideas from that I hope will kind of weave what we've done tonight all together. The first piece that he talks about is the difference between compliance and engagement. So let's just think for a minute. What is the difference in behavior? What do you see differently between compliance and engagement? Anybody want to think about that? Engagement, self-motivated. So the person's willing to kind of, yeah.
Once I learned the concept, it says if you kick your dog to do something, you're the one who's motivated.
Right. If you have to kick your dog, you're the one to get it to do something, you're the one who's motivated. Okay. So really you want that dog to do whatever it's doing, back to the sort of self-motivation. Any other differences between engagement and compliance? What that might look like? Think about your kids. Enthusiasm in engagement?
Yes.
Yeah. Initiative? Empowering. Choice. Right. So, and compliance is just not that. Yes.
Yeah, compliance seems to imply like some kind of almost like a goal attainment, like some completing something, but engagement doesn't really imply that.
Okay.
It doesn't sort of imply that you've necessarily accomplished something or you followed some path, whatever, but compliance seems to imply that you have.
You've complied. You've finished something.
Yeah.
Somebody else's goal, perhaps. And engagement may finish things too. We don't know, but you're saying that that's a bit of a slant. Laura?
I was going to say compliance has more negative tone.
Yeah.
in it, and also could, strikes me as being more along the lines of power struggle or engagement. There's that goal. It's more positive and looks like there's going to be more of a goal ownership or anything for the unification.
Yeah. Okay, good. So what Daniel Pink talks about is that most of us, as parents and teachers, we would want more engaged than compliance. Would you agree with that? So I know we talk a lot about that at school. We talk a lot about how do we engage students. And I talk to teachers that I work with about how did you know the students were engaged? What does that look like? What does that sound like? And that's a really important concept that goes along. What he talks about in terms of where that comes from, and some of you were alluding to that in your description, was it is about choice. It is about giving people choice and opportunity to engage with whatever it is you want them to do in the way perhaps that it fits for them or works for them. And in doing that then, you build a different level, I was going to say a different level of engagement. You build a different level even of ownership, I think, on some of the things that we're asking kids to do. Daniel Pink says, I'm not talking about turning the dial up to 10 on everything in terms of autonomy. You know, we need to give them autonomy and choice, not everything everywhere. I think that the parenting challenge and the teacher school challenge in that is the right level of autonomy at the right time for the right purpose. And that's a dance that we do all of the time as we try to figure that out. So thinking back to what we've talked about before in terms of sustaining attention, we talked about having choice and meaning as the way that sustains attention. Daniel Pink saying the research says if we can go to engagement through autonomy, we'll get way more motivated people. So those two pieces in my mind live pretty close together. The second one is one that you will find very familiar. The difference between performance goals and learning goals, and this may actually come back to your point about compliance and achieving things. I'll just give you a second to read that quote. Daniel Pink actually quotes Carol Dweck's work. And if you haven't read the book, The Growth Mindset, that is another resource that I would highly recommend to you. So great, and something that we talk about a lot at school. But Carol Dweck would differentiate between a learning and a growth mindset this way, or a performance goal and a learning goal, this way. In a learning goal, someone would say, I want to master algebra. Like, I just want to get it. I want to be good at it. I just want to master it. I want to understand it. That's a learning goal. A performance goal would say, I want to get an A in algebra. And what the research is starting to show or notice is that the student who says it as a performance goal, I want to get an A in algebra, doesn't necessarily learn it, right? They do it and they respond to it, but they don't necessarily take it all in. And they would be the students, when the going gets tough, that would be likely to say, they wouldn't persist. They may not be able to stay in attention. They may not even fully understand why they're even doing algebra. Well, I don't know if anyone can fully explain that, but there's that whole piece, right? So whereas if you go to the learning goal perspective, someone who sits down to really master algebra and understand it and figure out how it fits in the world and make sense of it is probably going to do really well. And they're going to carry with them a much deeper learning and understanding. So as we're thinking about this is the second piece that Daniel Pink talks about in terms of motivation and sticking with things as we move through. And the last one I like a lot. Rigor and playfulness pair much more smoothly than we think they do, and that pairing can have some spectacular results. So we talk a lot about rigor. We hear that word thrown around a lot. And his point is, in this world today that we live in, these are the offices. This is Google's office, and this one is Ticketmaster in London. Both organizations have set out to create space where people will come together, and there's a whole, this link takes you to so many interesting workplaces. I'd like to show it here and see what some of the people think, but it takes you to all these places that these masters, I mean, creativity, Google, Facebook, all these different organizations are moving to bring people together so that things can happen. Problems can get solved, you know? Creating things can happen together, and often done in the context of playfulness, of play. And so as we think about our own children and trying to motivate them to stay with the goals they set and to sustain the attention that we want them to sustain, there is an element there of really noticing that playfulness and rigor go pretty closely together. I want to just play a very quick clip where Daniel Pink is being interviewed, and it's just about a minute, but it's interesting to hear what he says because he's talking about students. If I can find it. Here we are.
Let's talk about students. One of the things that, again, comes out in this research is that people do better at a task. Again, whether that task is spelling, or whether that task is hitting a curveball, or whether that task is playing the viola. If they know why they're doing it in the first place. If they're told to do something, knowing why they're doing something makes them better at it. I mean, it doesn't seem like brain surgery there, but there's now evidence showing that that's the case. And I think what happens a lot in school is that it's all about how. Here's how you do it. Here's how you do a quadratic equation. Here's how you write a 5-paragraph essay. Here's how you do a paper chromatography experiment in chemistry. And we often give short shrift to why. Why are we doing this in the first place? Why does it matter that we solve quadratic equations? Why does it matter that we learn how to write a 5-paragraph essay? And I think, one of the simplest, most effective performance-enhancing tips for any organization, including for schools, is for the people in charge, whether those people are teachers or whether those people are principals or whether those people are corporate managers, is, in a given week, have 2 fewer conversations about how to do something and 2 more about why you're doing it in the first place. And I think that's especially true for kids. We look, when kids say, well, why are you doing this? We often dismiss that as an annoying question, when in fact it's actually a pretty darn good question. And we need to be able to answer it, not to placate the kids, but because there's a rich body of evidence showing that when people know why they're doing something, they do it better.
Yep, that's okay. There we go. Okay. So, we've had a bit of a journey tonight, quick journey. Started with juggling. It was play, did you notice? We started with play. We learned from that play. And we've looked at the whole idea of initiating a task, sustaining attention in that task, persisting with the goals that we set. And then we kind of said, you know what, underneath all of that weaves motivation. And so linked to motivation are some ideas that are floating around out there that are just interesting to consider, right? Where we think about compliance versus engagement, or performance versus learning goals, or rigor and playfulness. Ideas that fit together, but we may not have put together. And so I guess as we sort of head out from here, what my hope is that A, you've had a chance to have a bit of fun tonight, and B, that there's a couple of ideas that you're taking away that are different, new, a new idea around these ideas that will help you in your home. I'm just going to, one of the greatest things about brain is that if you talk to somebody about an idea before you leave, it moves to your long-term memory and you'll actually take it with you out the door. It's such a cool thing. So I'm going to just ask you for about a minute. Talk to someone beside you about any of the ideas you heard tonight that just kind of jumped out at you, and then we'll wrap up. I've got a couple of announcements and we'll wrap up. Okay? Just any idea. So I don't want to hold you. I do make a commitment to try to stay close till 8 o'clock. I want to give you a couple of dates to mark down, and you're actually getting the sneak preview. Some of you who've been involved before know that we have a Brain Awareness Week. It's our first full week back after our spring break, and that's no different this year. It's April 13th to 17th. We're really excited because we have a speaker, you'll see her up in the corner, named Lynn Lyons. She's coming from the Eastern States, and she's written a book called Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, and she is really interested in anxiety in kids and the brain plasticity of kids and what we can do as teachers and parents to support that. So kind of to your point too, there's a level of anxiety around this performance piece, right? And so she's going to be here. She's going to be here. Normally we have our event towards the end of the week on Brain Awareness Week. She was only available on the Monday, so we're going to do it Monday. And that'll be an event in the gym. It's usually quite a large event. And I've talked to her on the phone. She seems delightful, and she'll have some great ideas for us in terms of supporting our kids in Brain Week with their plasticity and anxiety and all that good stuff. We have the opportunity, Richard Guare, who's the author of Smart But Scattered, one of the two authors. When I was emailing with him and chatting with him, he said he was in Vancouver in May. And so I said, wow, could you just pop across the pond and come talk to us? Because we've been reading your books. And so he's going to do that. So we're adding an extra, we're adding an extra night. But I'm hopeful that you'll find it helpful. And so that's going to be Thursday, May the 7th here. And that's a special thing that he's doing for us. And he is the author of these Smart But Scattered books. So we'll be publicizing that to the community, but you guys get the sneak preview in terms of what's coming up.